type of animal, they'll have lids put on the top, the irises are different, etc. So that's one answer, how we answer what the head of the design. But what this individual is Professor Richard Borowski from, he's a professor of biology from NYU. He's going to talk about some very unusual situation, is fish. And what happens to certain fish in certain conditions is they effectively lose their eyes if they're in total darkness. And what happens is the eye represses into the genes, it's still there, and then over generations, if they take them and put them in light again, the eye will come back. And as you probably know, there are many species that live down in darkness in the ocean, 1,000 feet or so, and then none of those animals have eyes because there's no need for eyes to be dark. So he's going to talk about that subject, the eyes, and he'll be talking to us on February 13th in our brunch. At the monthly meeting, which is going to be February 24th, the last Thursday of the month, we're going to have an individual who's also going to talk about evolution, and he's going to talk about how the body develops antibodies. And he shows how antibodies develop the revolution. So that's going to be another interesting way of talking about evolution. So we're having two speakers this month, not one like at the animal group has, we have two. Okay? Speakers talking about evolution in Darwin. In our group on Living Without Religion group, which is always the second Wednesday of every month, Linda Blakely, who runs that group, the subject this time is going to be happiness. What is it? How do we define happiness? Can atheists can we atheists achieve it? Does happiness depend upon others? So it'll be that topic of our small group there. And we're still discussing this one, but I'll talk about it. For our meetup, which is always the third Tuesday of every month, we do it different days. Michael Durian is a discussion group. The subject we have at this point, it may change, I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. And here's the subject, here's how we framed it. Your new boss is a born-again Christian and a Tea Party member. What do you do?
Transfer.
I think it's a great topic. So we're trying to convince Michael. He was a little shook up when he saw the title. He got confused with another person, actually a job situation he has. But I think that should be very good. So those are our upcoming events for the month of February. Now, a couple other pieces of information. If you are a member of New York City Atheists, you get a hat. This is our summer hat. We actually have a dark hat, okay? And I ordered these about 6 months ago. They were made in China, and it took 6 months to get them here. Okay, they were cheap, but it takes 6 months. So if you are a member of New York City Atheists, I've got some hats here. Pick up your hat, or become a member. This is ours. I love this color. And we upgraded our hat this year. This is embroidered, and on the back of it, we had embroidered NYC. So we have hats available. Finally, Nicholas Wade's book, The Faith Instinct, which are for sale. As you know, we don't believe in the Ten Commandments per se, because the first four are all about God. Anyway, the 11th commandment is "Thou shalt not be retail," right?
What's the price of the book?
We're going to charge $15 for these, okay? Tax-free, okay? And I guess he'll sign them at the end, right? He'll sign them. So, okay. So, without further ado, I want to introduce you to our Master of Ceremonies, Dennis Horvitz. He is the Master of Ceremonies of 2 of our 4 cable shows. By the way, we have 4 cable.
So many people believe in it.
Just walk right into the...
You just put it right up to your mouth.
Okay, can everyone hear okay?
Yes.
So for the purposes of this talk, I'm not going to take any position, however, on whether or not God exists. I'm going to talk about religious behavior, which we all know does exist. And if you're an atheist, well, you can take this as a deconstruction of religion. And if there are any people of faith who have surreptitiously snuck into this meeting, well, as long as you believe in evolution and accept that the Creator through evolution has shaped our bodies and our minds, there's no reason why the Creator should not also have shaped a religious instinct for us. So I'm going to try and explain for you first how and why religion evolved in early societies, why it gave such a survival advantage. And then, since the religion of ancient societies was very different from the forms we're familiar with, I'm going to try and go through with you the cultural transformation religion, from the primitive form to the forms we're familiar with nowadays. And then I'll try and show how the biological roles that religion played in ancient times are still very relevant today. So I may end up with a message that some of you may find a little disquieting, because I'm going to argue that religion was immensely valuable, was as critical for our survival in the past, and in fact still continues to play very beneficial roles. So I'm not saying that every individual needs to be religious, that's not the case, but I think every society probably does need religion, and evidence of that is that we don't really have any examples of societies that don't have religion. We do have examples of society where people try to stamp out religion, like the Soviet Union, and it's come roaring back. And I think this evolutionary approach to religion also explains phenomena like that. So why do I think religion has a biological basis? Well, if you look at societies around the world, every known society has some form of religion. So this is clearly a very ancient, very distinctive behavior. And either it evolved independently in all the human societies we have, or, which is far more probable to me, it was present in the ancestral human population. And so when that population dispersed across the road, all its descendant societies had religion. But now religion has various constant features, while at the same time being very different in each society. So the constant features are, firstly, there are always supernatural agents who live in a sort of parallel universe, in a separate world, and yet paradoxically they can be reached, they can be communicated with by prayer and sacrifice. And there's a reciprocity about this relationship. One of the many human instincts we have is a sort of feeling of give and take, of reciprocity. If I give you a gift, then you must give me a gift back. Probably not immediately, but sometime later, it's your duty to give me something back. And this notion of reciprocity is at the heart of religion. So we give the gods prayer and sacrifice, and that obliges them to give us back what we want from the gods, which is, which is of children and security and wealth and so forth. So what accompanies this exchange is something very important. It's religious laws. So people must obey religious laws on pain of divine punishment. And this is what makes the whole system work, because these laws, although they come with lots of sort of taboos about diet and dress and so forth that are essentially irrelevant, other than to sort of mark you as a member of that religion, nonetheless all religions have at their core various laws that are very important for society's survival. And they concern things like morality, which is the basis of the social fabric. They concern rules about marriage and reproduction, who may marry whom. They govern warfare, how people behave in war, and encouraged to sacrifice their lives for the sake of community. And they also are very important demographically. They govern whether the society, whether people are encouraged to have more children, or in some cases fewer children. So where do all these come from? Well, they are in effect the collective wisdom of the tribe. They're what the elders or leaders of the tribe know are necessary for the tribe's survival. But because these rules are imputed to the gods, they carry the weight of divine sanction. So you can see that for primitive peoples who cannot afford a sort of police force or a judiciary, they have no law book, they are a collection of sort of self-willed individuals all looking out for themselves. Religion constitutes an invisible government a highly efficient and effective one, because the enforcer is in everyone's head, and the rules have divine sanction attached to them, and everyone will obey the rules or fear the gods' vengeance, probably in this world, or if not, in the next world. So I think it's helpful at this stage to understand how religion works, is to compare it with language. So language is something that is so complicated that a baby cannot be expected to absorb the rules of grammar as it goes along, to figure them out for itself. There must be some neural mechanism in there that enables a baby, an infant, to pick up and understand the language it hears spoken around it. So you see this division of function is the genetics, the neural circuits that provide the learning mechanism, and it's the culture that provides the actual language that is spoken. So with religion it's very similar. There's a neural circuitry that predisposes people to buy into the religion of their community, usually at the age of puberty. But it's the culture that provides the content of religion. So these two systems are in fact very similar. They're communication systems, and language is a system for communicating thought. And religion is a very powerful system for communicating emotion. And shared emotions are immensely important for social cohesion. So what keeps a group together, what makes individuals put society's interest ahead of their own, is the shared emotional feeling that is given by religion. So I'd like briefly to talk about how the evolutionary context in which religion presumably appeared. So if you go back 5 million years ago, when we and chimps have a common ancestor who probably behave rather like chimps do now, because chimps haven't had to change very much, they still live in the same environment, whereas we've had to change a hell of a lot because we left the trees and had to survive in the open savannah. So if you take chimps as a model of our social structure 5 million years ago, we would have lived in a very rigid hierarchy with the alpha male on top and his allies, and then the other males all each knowing his position, and below those males there'd be a female hierarchy. But if you fast forward to 50,000 years ago, just before we were leaving Africa, when we all lived as hunters and gatherers, well, hunters and gatherers have a totally different social structure. They're all very egalitarian. There are no leaders. Anyone who tries to boss the group is quickly ostracized or killed if necessary. And they all sort of share everything like that and have no possessions. So how do you go through this complete switch in social structure from hierarchy to egalitarianism? It's very difficult, because as you do so, you're going to have two very serious threats, one from within and one from outside. So the threat from within is that people will freeload. They'll take what society has to give and not contribute anything. And the threat from outside is that other groups will come and attack you if they can, and eliminate you, because earlier groups were probably very territorial. So religion is the answer to both these problems. Religion makes the group internally cohesive and makes sure everyone contributes, and religion also spurs people to sacrifice for the sake of their community, even up to their lives if necessary. So it's during this process, if you imagine these sort of small hunter-gatherer groups, each sort of fixed in a territory, all constantly fighting each other, that natural selection would certainly favour those with the better group cohesion, and hence those in which the religious instinct was strong, because religion was the ticket that provided the necessary social behaviours for survival. So it's very easy to imagine that the genes for religious behavior, the genes that will set up the circuitry that predispose you to buy into religion, becoming universal, just as the genes for language became universal, and for very similar reasons. I think it's useful to understand the nature of primitive religion, how it differed from the forms we're familiar with today. I think one feature of religion that everyone will recognize is that somehow or other it's deeply entwined with music. So music was a sort of early human faculty. It's very mysterious. No one really knows why it evolved. But in my view, it's best understood in the context of religion with which it's always allied. So religion may have been a sort of an early attempt on evolution's part to sort of create an emotional language, but it wasn't, and maybe that's what we had before speech. But as soon as language comes along, then it sort of overshadows music. But music is still a vital part of early religion, and so is dance. So the religions of early people are centered around massive dance ceremonies, because there's something about movement in unison that gives people a feeling of exaltation and of belonging to a shared community. So this is what armies have discovered with their military drills, which they still do. So marching around in unison on a parade field is suicide on a modern battlefield. Why do people do it? Because this movement in unison encourages a feeling of togetherness, of being part of a group, of willing to sort of sacrifice and share for the group. And this is at the center of most primitive religions. That it's focused around dance. Primitive religions don't have a lot to say. They're not into theology. They're into this sort of community feeling which you build by these music and dance sessions. So this shows Bushman and the Kalahari going through one of their religious ceremonies. It's a little hard to see that the women sit in the middle and clap, and the men dance round. They have on their ankles these silk moth cocoons that are hollowed out with a shell inside to make a lovely swishing sound. You have everyone chanting. The dances sort of start at roughly sort of 9 in the evening around the campfire. They go on all through the night, and people with this sustained physical activity, that men fall into trance, and in these trances they commune with their gods. And everyone sort of watching can see that other people sort of communing directly with the gods. So this is a distinctive feature of primitive religion. It's all very communal. There's no priest, there's no hierarchy. There's direct sort of emotional connection with the gods, and that is what sort of binds the whole community together. So when we come to modern times, society goes through a wrenching change, and religion changes with it, because the purpose of religion is to let society survive. So the hunter-gathering way of life began to stop about 15,000 years ago, when we sort of settled down in much larger communities. And these larger communities had a hierarchy. The hierarchy sort of came back. The rulers would use religion as the justification for their authority. Often they would declare themselves chief priest or even a god. The Queen of England is still head of the Church of England, as a sort of reflection of this ancient rite. And religion, instead of being a sort of communal affair, it then becomes organized. So the priests come in as intermediaries between the people and their gods. If you're running an organized religion, it's very dangerous to let people communicate directly with the gods, because then people will start having their own private revelation, and there will be no sort of unity of message. You have to keep the priests as intermediaries and to suppress sectarianism, because religions are very prone to split apart in schism unless everything is heavily controlled. So the singing and the dancing, which are sort of very emotional, have been sort of tamped down in modern religions. The reason why we have pews in churches, it's not for people to sit down. The pews were put there to stop them dancing, because dancers get out of hand and think they're communicating directly. And one of the most distinctive uses of religion during this transition period, when we were sort of first beginning agriculture, which is sort of backbreaking work and completely different from the way of life the hunter-gatherers are used to. Religion was extremely useful for making people go out and do the hard work of agriculture, for tilling the fields and planting the crops. And that's why many religions today still bear the marks of these agricultural festivals. So Passover comes from Pesach, which is the barley harvest in the Canaanite religion from which Judaism is derived. And of course Easter is related to Passover, and both festivals occur at springtime. So they're distinctive agricultural festivals. So, I think I'll just go very quickly over this, but and we have lots of religions today, like we have lots of languages. And these two cultural forms, as I've been suggesting to you, are very similar to each other. So this is a map of a tree of Indo-European languages. So the way a new language forms is first it's from a parent language. Every language splits apart from a parent, and then it may have words of its own. It sort of develops dialects, and it may borrow words from neighbouring languages. And that basically is how you can put all languages on a tree. And if we had the knowledge, we could trace all languages far back, probably to the single language spoken by the ancestral human population. Well, religion, when you think of it, works by a very similar process. Every religion has a parent religion. There are very few religions that are invented out of whole cloth. I guess Scientology maybe is an exception, but that's not a real religion. So Judaism comes from the religion of the ancient Canaanites. Christianity is a very sort of deft amalgam of Judaism with the mystery cults that were common in the Roman Empire. Islam is probably an Arabization of a Christian sect, and so they're all related. So I'd like to come to the ways in which religion still plays a very important part in societies today. So one of the things that's most essential for society's survival is its rate of reproduction. So if you're a society under threat, you need to reproduce as fast as you can so that you don't get wiped out. So if you look at new sects like Mormonism, for example, Mormons have a very high rate of reproduction, which is perfectly understandable if you consider their origins. They were very much persecuted when they first began, and salvation obviously lies in having as many children as possible. So the religious rules are usually set to maximize the rate of reproduction, but they can also be used to minimize it. So if you put lots of people into nunneries or monasteries, you're going to reduce the rate of reproduction. If you have practices like sati, where the widow is burned on her dead husband's pyre, again you're going to reduce the rate of reproduction. Now, why should we ever want to reduce reproductive rates? Well, through much of the past, most agricultural societies live in Malthusian conditions. In other words, as soon as there's an increase in population, the extra miles eat up the surplus, and everyone's back to living at the edge of starvation. So the only time that real wages, for example, increased during the Middle Ages was after the Black Death, when 20% of the population was killed and labour was scarce and wages went up, but they quickly went back again. So, and we've escaped from the Malthusian trap because of the Industrial Revolution. But in fact, if you're living at the edge of subsistence, increasing population keeps everyone poor and miserable. So there are very good reasons to try and decrease reproduction. Now, whether this was done consciously, I think probably not. But it's very interesting that if you look at religions like medieval Christianity and all the rules they had for governing reproduction, you couldn't sleep with your wife on saints' days during Lent. In fact, there was only about 1 day in 3 when sexual intercourse was allowed by the religion. So rules like that obviously must have decreased the rate of reproduction. And you see even today, all religions are keenly interested, despite the fact that the gods live in this distant supernatural realm, the gods nonetheless are keenly interested in the minutiae of human reproduction. So all the rules the Catholic Church has, for example, about no contraceptives and so on and so forth. Now, another major concern of religion is warfare. So there are many, there are some people who blame religion for warfare, but I think that is an oversimplification, because religions exist to serve society's survival. So they are very adaptable. And it's societies that decide to go into war with each other, and when they do, religion is a very important motivational tool. But it's much like weapons. Weapons don't cause wars. Weapons are a means of war. And I think religion, too, is best understood as a means of war. So if you look at the ancient Israelite religion, when Judaism was used as, it sort of probably came to being as a way of justifying the recapture of the northern kingdom of Israel by the southern kingdom of Judah. It was used to inspire some 3 very violent revolts against the Roman Empire, one of which the whole Roman legion was lost. But after a while, during the rabbinate period, the rabbis said, this isn't working out so real well. So the nature of Judah, of the Israelite religion was sort of changed into the very specific form of Judaism we're familiar with today, and that was the way it prevailed for many centuries until we have the foundation of the State of Israel, which has one of the world's best professional armies. So if you look at that particular religion over a long period, it starts out very martial, it becomes pacific, and then it becomes martial again. If you look at Christianity, you see a very different path. So Christianity started out as a sort of small, beleaguered, persecuted sect, which had to get along in the Roman Empire, so it was very peaceful. Members were forbidden to take up arms, you couldn't join the Roman army. Then when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, then and Christianity now became very a part of the establishment. Then Christians were allowed to serve in battle, although not their bishops. But even that was believed in the Middle Ages when Pope Julius twice led armies into battle. So again, with Christianity, you can see the religion's attitude towards warfare changing in response to the social circumstances. Now, the third place in which religion is very important is in the social fabric. So, morality is one of the many sort of systems, one of the many inbuilt systems on which religion depends. So, religion depends on our appreciation of music, depends on language, and it also interacts with our moral instinct. So, we have some 2 moral systems, really. We have a very ancient kind of morality. That's when we instantly know something is wrong or right. And that is sort of pops into our head from the subconscious. And then we've built up a second moral system, which you could call moral judgment, and that's where we sort of take these moral intuitions that have suddenly appeared in our mind, and we argue like a lawyer that that is the best thing to do, and that's how we sort of burnish our reputation, especially in small communities. So we have this moral instinct, but religion, and you can know what's right, but there's a difference between knowing what's right and doing it. So religion, I think, has played a very important role in encouraging people to follow their moral instincts according to whatever the current laws are. Now, for a long time, people very much distrusted atheists, and in this society, which is very religious, they still do to a large extent. And the reason is people think, well, if you don't believe in God, what is there to make you keep your word? So this was firmly believed for many centuries, and it still is believed by a lot of people. Now, I think that's wrong because atheists take just as good care as everyone else to follow the moral norms of their society. But it might be true that if you had a whole society that was composed of atheists, then and had no religious feelings or instinct, then it might be that the social fabric would get a little decay. But we don't know because we've never had any such society. Now, although economists don't like to admit this, our whole economic life takes place within the fabric of society. All economic transactions are based on trust. And this trust is something that religion has provided from an early day. So for all these reasons, I think you can see religion plays a very important social role. It's not necessary for everyone in the society to believe in religion, but it is necessary for everyone in society to be on the same page as to what the rules of moral behavior are. And religion, I think, remains one way of getting us there, certainly in this society. And I think even in European societies where very few people now go to church, nonetheless, most of them sort of buy into religious stories, religious ideas, and have their sense of social fabric shaped by religion. So I think I'll pause there and ask you questions.
Question, please go to the microphone.
Because it's superimposed on all these other systems. And so I just assume that since the genes exist for the reasons I have argued to are plausible, I assume that we will find the localization at some stage, to some stage. To your second question, I'm not quite sure I understand. I'm not suggesting that the behavior came first and influenced the genes. I think the genes for this behavior became more common because people who behaved in this way for their societies had such an enormous social advantage. So I didn't get into this, but I am suggesting that group level selection, which is very controversial in theory, if it works in people, then group level selection is a very effective way of bringing our many social behaviors into the genome.
On this slide, there was an entry at the very bottom saying something like biology and religion, and then two bullets saying adaptive versus non-adaptive, and then the second bullet said group selection. And I was wondering if you could speak to something of that as well, because you passed by that slide rather quickly.
Oh, okay, so very few biologists have looked at the issue of religion, but I think I might say most of those who have think it has a biological basis. So this includes Richard Dawkins. But then Richard goes on to say he thinks religion is not adaptive. In other words, it wasn't selected for itself, but it came as a passenger in the wake of something else that was being selected. So the
Spandrel, yes.
classic example of this is the redness of the blood. So obviously nature doesn't care what colour our blood is, but hemoglobin, that was the best sort of gas exchange molecule, just happens to be red. So the redness of the blood is accidental. Is religion accidental? It seems to me highly unlikely when you consider how very costly it is. So many of these primitive societies, particularly Australian Aborigines, some of these religious ceremonies would take 2 months and they would last day and night. So any tribe that invested so much time and effort in religion, if it came up another tribe that was investing the same time and effort in warfare, it would just get creamed. So something that carries such high costs as religion did in early communities must carry corresponding benefits. So therefore religion, in my view, is highly unlikely to be non-adaptive, as Richard says. And I think Richard is forced into this position because if he's once admits it's adaptive, then the next step is he has to admit that it carried a big survival advantage. And then he has to say that it was very good for something. And that's a road he doesn't want to go down.
And group selection, the second bullet, group selection.
Okay, so group selection is quite controversial among biologists, including among Richard, who built his reputation on a book called The Selfish Gene, which is has natural selection acting on the lowest level possible. But most biologists think that group selection is possible theoretically. It's just that individual selection goes so much faster that it'll always overwhelm any effect of group selection. So that's fair enough, but humans may be a special case. So for two reasons. One is that these hunter-gatherer tribes, as I mentioned, are very egalitarian. So any individual advantage is likely to be suppressed. And if you're an Einstein, it does you absolutely no good. If you're a mighty hunter, that's more relevant, you sort of catch a lot. That doesn't do any good because you are forced to share the catch. So you aren't necessarily in a better position to pass your genes on. So selection at the individual level is going to be suppressed in hunter-gatherer tribes. And meanwhile, selection at the group level will rise depending on the level of warfare. If you have constant warfare between groups, any group that has a slight edge is going to prevail. That means the group selection pressure could go faster, be more powerful than individual selection pressure. And in that circumstance, you could get selection for genes that favor all the kinds of sociality that we have, including religion.
Thank you very much.
Incest. Well, you know, what actually are the neurocircuits telling us? Well, it seems that the actual message is, if you knew this person in infancy and lived under the same roof with them, they're not a suitable marriage partner. So we know that from experiments in, from tracking people in kibbutz in Israel who lived together, taken away from their families much of the day and lived so intimately with other people, and very few of them have married among themselves. So this is one reason for thinking that that's how that particular neural circuit works. You know, which is quite, I don't think anyone could have predicted that that's how the incest taboo is laid down. And similarly, you know, there's no way we can tell exactly what the message is for religion because it's a complex behavior. But you know, we'll find out someday maybe. I should take the next question.
Yes. Can I just, I understand that, I appreciate that sometimes when you ask a question, you do need to lead into it. Just to
my name is Dr. Patrick Morfillo. I'm a PhD in genetics, and I have to say that the vast majority, if not all, of the comments in the Science Times were perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect, man. Super. You made a nice analogy with the language, and rather than I would say language instinct, so we have a grammar instinct, okay? And there are mutations among humans where humans are incapable of processing grammar, okay? And the moral instinct, no? There are mutations in humans where people are psychopaths, okay? The question is, if it is genetic, you know, the corollary would be the following: there should be people who are incapable in believing in religion, even if they're brought up in a very religious family and society. Or you could call them the skeptics, or you know, like who we are. No, but you should always find some kind of genetic makeup, a mutation somewhere. Right. And so far, from my reading of the literature, I haven't picked it up. Okay. Okay.
All right. So, well, that's a nice point. I think And the point is that if there are genes for religion, we should be able to find people who have mutations in that gene and who are totally incapable of absorbing new religion. I think one reason, though, why it might be quite hard for us to find such people is that the religion instinct is something that it's part of a developmental program. So it's like language. If you don't learn language at a specific age, then you can never learn it properly. So there's very rare cases of children who are brought up with totally abusive parents or perhaps by animals, but they can't speak and they never really learn to speak properly. So I think religion is a similar developmental program. The program starts to unfold around the age of puberty, and that's when you're most likely to sort of buy into the religion of your community. And that's why all these religion induction ceremonies of bat mitzvah and confirmation are set at that very age. Now, if you don't buy into religion during that crucial period, then it's never very important for you later in life. So that's why it's so hard to find your mutants.
But that's
Well,
not how,
no,
but
but
that's not how it works.
we
though.
do have people who have this inability to process grammar properly, and we have people who are psychopaths, even if they are brought up among very
For
moral
example,
people.
in an undersupplied area,
So in that case, even if somebody has been properly brought up, you should be able to find somebody who's been very properly brought up in a religious setting and still be totally skeptical and see that genetically it's different with that twin study. I don't know. See, that's what bothers me. Because whenever it's genetic, psychopathy, for example, you find among twins higher correlation among non-twins. So the question is, in religiosity, do you find it with homozygous twins versus dizygotic twins and so on? And this is one of the key. If you want to do genetics, this is one of the key things where you can see if there is a genetic.
All right, I take your point, but look how difficult it was to find the FOXP2 gene. It was one speech therapist in London who came across this particular family, and then she came across another individual who had a break in a particular chromosome. And think how well studied speech is. And that gene was only found, I think, sort of 12 years ago. So for finding your non-religion mutants, I'd say give it time and set up some organization that sort of screens people as rigidly as speech pathology is screened.
Sorry, we're going to have to move on.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
My question really concerns empiricism and causation. In your early slides, you talked about the relationship between the supplicant, the primitive supplicant, and his divine personage. He prays for good crops, good weather, good whatever, and he expects to get it back. Now, that won't always happen. And if he doesn't pray, he will, or doesn't supplicate his divine individual, it will occur. He will have good weather. He will have a good situation. So that there is no direct cause and effect between this religious practice. Yet, on a more mundane level, he manufactures objects that actually perform certain things like spirit points. He locates good food and bad food and herbs and that may be medicinal. So on one level, he has a direct empirical ability to find things that work. And on the other hand, he's dealing with something where the empirical and the causation connection is at best problematical. How would you then reconcile the two behaviors of a primitive society?
I'm sorry, but the two behaviors between the pragmatic thing of building tools and
Building tools and finding proper foods as opposed to finding dangerous foods or poisons, and knowing the difference between them and how they directly affect the individual, as opposed to appealing to a divine personage to provide something to him that he may not provide.
Well,
Do you take the question?
I don't think that members of a primitive society would see that as a problem, because religion provided all the explanations they sought for the natural world and events in their
There were
life.
times when they prayed for rain and they didn't get it.
Well,
There were times when they didn't pray for rain and they did get it. There was no way that when they built their spear points, they built them to function in a certain way. If they didn't do it in the right way, it didn't function. So it's a direct cause and effect, a direct cause empirical evidence of a functioning object. Whereas the other aspect was there was no direct.
All right, but you're thinking like a scientist, and I think primitive peoples weren't able to think in that way. I wouldn't have seen any contradiction if they did.
Next one.
I'd just like to comment that without isolating a specific gene, there is evidence for a genetic component of being religious. And that is with twin studies, which they do to identify genetic influences in many cases. In identical twins separated at birth, one grew up in a religious home, one grew up in a non-religious home. They were both either likely to be religious or not religious, independent of the environment. So that's, for me, that's fairly clear evidence that there is a genetic component.
I think that's right. I think those twin studies, I've always interpreted them as referring to religiosity, in other words, to the intensity of religion. Now, my argument has been, though, that the genes for religion are universal. So, within genes that are universal, you don't see any variation. And you don't see really any variation in the faculty for language, apart from these sort of rare mutations. So my assumption is that if religion is the same way, these twin studies are probably showing you not religion itself, but an aspect of it, which is how intensely religious you
Well,
are.
it's probably more complicated than language. I mean, we're finding out a lot of things are multiple genes. It's not like there's one gene for this, but there's a tendency, you know.
Right,
and
just
it's so I don't think a direct comparison to language is really likely the way it is.
Tom.
Last year's American Atheist Convention, we had a talk by Dr. Thompson from Virginia, and he came in and he got several hundred atheists to pinch themselves here, like this, and you pinch yourself as hard as you can, and you see that's your pain threshold. And then he made us all get up, and he had the presentation. And he made us sing Amazing Grace and sway and, take our neighbor's hands and so forth. And then he asked us to test our pain, threshold again. And of course our pain threshold had significantly increased because all of these religious rituals, exactly as you say, trigger chemical changes in the brain. They increase your levels of dopamine, they, decrease your levels of, other drugs that, cause you to feel pain. They just make you feel good, and that's what religion does. And, absolutely it's not that you're hardwired for religion, it's that you're hardwired to, accept certain things, and religion provides these things for you, so it has a genetic basis. And, I don't really have a question, and so I'll stop here.
Very good comment, thank you.
But I don't remember what that was your exact name.
Can we let this gentleman,
Okay, so I find this all really interesting, and I actually agree with you completely. So I can see behavior being affected by group dynamics and by group evolution. How do you go from something that's behavioral to something that's essentially intellectual, a belief in an abstract entity? I mean, it's a very simplistic view would be as a child, you look to your parents to provide you for you. So as an adult, there's no one to provide for you but you. So do you look towards this imagined parent? That's very simplistic. What is it that takes you from these evolved behaviors to something intellectual like a belief in an abstract entity?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think there is the intellectual content of religion, the whole of theology, is something we've sort of built up in a sort of very baroque structure on the basis of these simple instincts. But it's part of the sort of variable aspect of religion. religion. It's like language is arbitrary. It's arbitrary what sound you associate with meaning. So many aspects of religion are arbitrary, including all the sort of intellectual part you mentioned. And they're just sort of the verbiage, as it were, that makes up a religion. But it just in among all this sort of complex religious behaviors and thoughts are the sort of basic instincts that promote the survival of the society.
I mean, this all started out very simplistically, going from evolved behavior to simple religious concepts, until we got today, which are very complex religious concepts. So do you have any examples of going from group behavior, evolved group behavior, to simple religious beliefs? That's what I'm very curious about. So,
Well, I think a lot has. The people who've speculated about the origin of religion, let me just mention 2 points. One is that the origin of religious ideas may well have originated in dreams. So primitive people in dreams, they would have seen their dead ancestors. And think how hard it would be to account for something like that. And they would very naturally have assumed that their dead ancestors were indeed alive in a sort of parallel world and had been in dreams. And the second point I'd make is, I think if you look at this vital transition we made from hunter-gathering to settled societies, one of the ways of organizing settled societies is in tribes. And then many societies today are tribal. So what is it that unites a tribe? Well, it's that the ancestor of long ago, the ancestor to which everyone in that tribe is related. So that dead ancestor, certainly in early tribal religions, is the sort of central religious figure, and he gets sort of elevated to godlike status, but he is the common ancestor. So this is sort of one way in which religious ideas get amplified, but also very sort of connected to the mechanisms of religion in the society. But then for everything beyond that, all our sort of theology and our texts, all this is cultural stuff. I don't see any genetic basis for that. It's just sort of built on the sort of simple, primitive religion.
Without trying to be insulting, what would be the difference between being religious predisposed and being gullibility predisposed? Well, I mean, let's say you have a gene that predisposes you to gullibility, to believe what everybody believes. Okay? And then you have the advantage of group action. So, how can you differentiate between those two? I know it's a little bit twisted.
That's right.
Twisted is good.
I think if you're very gullible, that's not really a big survival advantage. You're not necessarily going to have a lot more children. Whereas if you're very religious and you're part of a community of people who are also very religious, you're going to have a very cohesive group, which whether you like it or not, is going to be more effective in survival and war. So that will lead you to have it.
So we know what Seneca says, all right? What Seneca said about religion, that the masses believe it to be true. Wise men believe it to know it to be false, and rulers see it to be useful.
Well, this is what I've been trying. That was the starting point.
No, that's why I brought it up.
Before we, can I just ask you and just everybody in general, are we using the term religion and belief interchangeably in this context? Pardon?
Or gullibility was his point.
No, I think your belief.
Oh, okay.
Belief more has to do with sort of personal belief and theology. And religion has sort of two aspects, which I should try to delineate more carefully. It has the social aspect and the personal aspect. So most of us are more aware of religion in the personal aspect. It's our personal relationship to our God or our creed or our community. But that's not the side that natural selection is interested in. Natural selection is interested in the social side. That's where we all act together because of religion. Now, for natural selection to be able to act on the social aspects of religion, it must be personally rewarding. So there must be a reward system that natural selection has put in our brains. Now you see that we have a reward system for food and for sex, but these are so ancient that there's a very low level of consciousness. So religion has come along much later, and the reward system for religion is sort of placed at a much higher level of our brain. So it's personally rewarding for lots of very sort of sophisticated intellectual reasons for a large part. And that's what, but the two things are separate. I think belief applies more to the personal side.
So my background is useful here. I used to drive a tractor on a wheat farm in the Australian outback. And what's significant there is when you have a grain-based culture, every year your success or failure in a culture is dependent on like 1 month of the year. Right? And you get a very psychotic mentality in a culture like that. And it's a psychotic mentality that we might miss in New York City, where food is somewhat more reliable and prosperity is more technically grounded. So when you think of what you call settled societies, they're actually fairly high-risk societies. Not only in the fact that food only turns up 1 month a year, the number of babies that die is an enormous proportion of the babies that are born. There are other high-risk factors. And I'm wondering if there wasn't something an increase in sort of a psychotic technology along with agriculture, particularly grain-based agriculture, that would explain a lot of what you would say is genetic, simply an adaptation, a cultural adaptation to a very high-risk environment.
Yes, that's a fascinating idea. Agriculture certainly is very high risk, particularly for primitive societies. And you see how religion will be a risk, at least psychological insurance.
Well, particularly for grain societies, because they are peculiar in only having one harvest a year, and it's a fairly short harvest.
Right.
And a lot can go wrong right up until the day of the harvest.
Right. No, religion will certainly be helpful.
I've always felt that religion arose to reinforce a morality and ethics that had already existed in the society. And he seemed to agree with that when he said that God's laws come from the wisdom of the elders, and also that religion promotes cohesion, but the cohesion already exists before the religion enforces it. And I was wondering whether I'm right in saying that you agree with that.
Yes, I certainly do. I think it's a very important point. I didn't have time to get into it, but I think the moral instinct has a sort of clear evolutionary history, in that although there are no animal species that we would call moral, nonetheless you can see behaviors that seem to be the sort of the building blocks of pre-morality. So in chimpanzee societies, for example, you have some regular peacemaking. The females will try and stop the males fighting with each other because it makes the society stronger, or it risks destroying the society if the fights go on. And you have a sense of hierarchy and order. There seem to be sort of social rules that the infants their bad behavior is sort of tolerated up to a certain age, and then they have to get into line. So all and there's a sense of fairness and reciprocity among chimpanzees. So all these are behaviors that could very easily have sort of built upward in our line toward a moral instinct, and could explain some of these sort of moral rules that exist in our subconscious.
Yeah, I just want someone who hasn't asked a question. Thank you. Could you account for why atheists aren't schizoid mutants? That's a serious question.
We are.
Can you say that question again? Can you account for why atheists aren't schizoid mutants? In other words, many of us have families, right? Have children, have friends, have jobs, right? We're not noticeably, have, let's say, a constellation of physical abnormalities that might indicate, right, a high level of mutation, right? So can you give an accounting for that? Because I think it would be a lot more credible.
Why are there no calico atheists?
Well, I mean, I see atheists are just like everyone else. It's just that for whatever reason, probably a cultural reason, during this sort of crucial window of time when you buy into your religion, atheists don't do so. So I think most people, I don't know this, but I'm guessing that most atheists have been atheists from the age when they had to make that decision, which was your society tells you must be bar mitzvah or confirmed, and at that point you have to make up your mind, do you believe this or not?
You used the phrase before, buy into, and have to buy into it tends to undermine the biological basis for religion.
I think, yeah, that's good. I think it's a good point.
By buy into, I mean making an emotional commitment. So religion is all about emotional communication. So that's what's going on there. And if you don't make that emotional commitment at that particular age, then it never really sort of comes back to you. So on this reconstruction, there's no reason why I should think that there's anything psychologically sort of damaged or wrong or unusual about atheists. They're just people who decided not to learn the language of religion.
Not psychologically, but socially.
Well,
I think that if you can't address this, it really is a serious weakness in what you're proposing. I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm saying that you haven't really demonstrated it if you cannot answer this kind of criticism.
well, let me take another stab at it. I think you will find lots of people who belong to a religion and practice it without actually believing in God. I mean, in this city, I've met many people who are good Jewish atheists. For
That
example,
only makes it worse. You don't make it worse.
I don't
Look,
think so. It makes everything
hypocrisy is a
sense.
very important social skill that atheists don't lack.
One can choose to not believe in the existence of a deity for perfectly good cultural, intellectual reasons, but one can still also wish to practice one's religion or associate with the other people who are practicing the same religion.
I don't think that atheism is primarily about believing in God or not. It has to do with some kind of social connection with religious authority. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not personally, I'm not entirely disagreeing with that.
Right.
I think it's more, what you're saying is an element of something of a larger.
It is, but I think it's a fundamental element.
All right, well,
We're not gonna
you're
say
saying
that.
atheists are special, and I'm saying they're not particularly special.
See, we were so close to solving this, and you had to go through it.
Can we keep the questions down to about 2
Yeah,
minutes?
I'm sorry.
Speak into the microphone.
See, the problem is you're addressing a room full of atheists, so that's the.
I want to comment on what you stated before about our rewards in religion, and to bring it back to primitive peoples in time, wherein we need a deer for swiftness, a bear for strength. Some societies would have certain totems which were holy to them.